Okay, I know we'll give it another minute just because I know there were a lot more people that had accepted. So you don't look so tired, Mike. I thought you said you were going to have dark circles under your eyes. Either that or your makeup artist has done well.
There's a reason that I wear glasses. It does help mask the dark circles. I've always had that. I could be an hour short on sleep and have the dark circles as far as that goes.
Time did you stop watching, Mike?
Stop watching or turn out the light. I turned out the light a little after 3. I stopped watching probably 45 minutes before that. But I was till a little after 2 getting out client reports. So that's pretty. It takes till midnight to kind of, or just a little after, to get the numbers pretty well squared away to know where you are most of the time on the House and Senate races.
Okay, well, I have 101. Is Katie joining us today? Do you know?
Well, I thought so, but as I was just looking at that she was supposed to, and that she'd said she would, but she and I haven't really talked this morning. Yeah. So
well, she may come in, so we'll wait and see on that. Before we get started, I would like to strongly promote registering for the MIAI convention for either for both the first day, which will be the webinar, and then for the second day, which is the annual meeting, the Guarantee Fund, and here comes Katie, meeting, as well as the introduction of new officers and directors. I also can't strongly hope that people will go out and sign up to visit the exhibitors. We rely on our associate members a lot for the support they provide, as well as the business services they provide to members. And while it's not the same thing as wandering around the banquet hall, the ballroom at the Holiday Inn, visiting with our exhibitors is strongly urged. So please take a few minutes and see who's presenting and sign up to visit them. And with that, a man who needs no introduction, Mike St. Cloud, who is our lobbyist for the Iowa legislature and a good friend of MIAI, who is going to give us an update on what, if anything, happened in the Iowa elections last night that could impact the insurance industry and the mutual insurance industry in specifics.
So yeah, this is one of those. This is what makes our job fun and interesting, but also maddening sometimes. Is the changes that come and the things that you didn't expect. So plenty of unexpecteds last night. But I'll start with the expecteds. Many of the I talked to, and I can't remember who I've given what briefing, but I've had many side conversations as well. Really expected that the Iowa Senate would kind of stay status quo, given the seats that were up. It didn't offer a lot of opportunities for Republicans or Democrats, and ultimately expectations were met there. It still remains 32 to 18 for Republicans in the Senate. Ultimately, Republicans lost a seat in West Des Moines, which is sort of expected. That's the reason that Charles Schneider, the president of the Senate, retired instead of running again, is he saw the handwriting on the wall with the 2 House seats that comprised his district flipping to Democrat last time. And as a Republican, I didn't think that prospect was very good. Turns out he was correct. And so he made his escape at the right time. So Republicans lost that one, but they picked up one that's maybe a little bit unexpected in Southeast Iowa that's currently held by Rich Taylor. So, and remarkably, they held on to all their incumbent seats, including a couple that were open, and one that's particularly difficult in Southeast Iowa that typically you would expect a Republican in that seat, which there has been, to be a one-term wonder, but that stayed Republican. I guess the wild card in there was that a member of their caucus, Marionette Miller Meeks, appears to have won a seat in Congress. So that will create at some point an open seat in a special election down in the Ottumwa area. So we'll see if there's a one vote that flips there here a little later on when she provided the recount, which I expect will probably happen there, goes her way, or the number stays pretty much where it is. And Miller Meeks will at some point have to resign her Senate seat, and there will be a special election. The big surprise was in the Iowa House. Ultimately expected it to be very competitive. Expected and really back in February, March timeframe. Given how long Republicans have been in control of the House, given the fact that Republicans have had the House, Senate, and governor's office for 2 election cycles, just not a very high likelihood that they hold it for 3. So we really kind of thought that Republicans, there was a good chance that Republicans would lose control of the House. Not only did they not lose it, and as it shifted as we got down the road here, I really thought in the last few days, or the last few weeks actually, last couple of weeks, really thought Republicans had improved their chances to at least hang on, but I think most of us thought by 1 or 2 votes. But as it turns out, not only hold on by 1 or 2, they picked up a total of 6. So they have a net gain of 6. They had 7 overall, but then they lost what was Ashley Hinson's seat over in the Cedar Rapids area. And so that's a pretty amazing number of pickups, which is not expected really by Democrats or Republicans. Republicans were shocked. I was talking about not knowing the numbers till a little after midnight. Just about midnight, I texted a friend of mine who was in the House Republican War Room and said, "Hey, do you have a minute to come out and visit?" And he said, "Yeah," and he was just dumbfounded with how many seats they picked up. So Republicans now control the Iowa House 59-41. So that's a pretty big margin. That's a caucus big enough to get unruly because you'll have people that want off the hook on certain votes, and if you let them, then somebody else wants off the hook on another one. It gets challenging to manage sometimes. Same thing with the Senate as far as that goes. Anytime you're over 30 in the Senate, it can get a little unmanageable at times. But in terms of insurance and insurance issues that we work on, the Republican majorities have been friendly. Not the Democratic majorities haven't been as well. Overall, Iowa's a very insurance friendly state, kind of no matter who's in charge. And we do have some friendly voices and faces on both sides of the aisle in both chambers as far as that goes. But on the whole, what we look to next is kind of what does the committee makeup look like? And that's where we're going to see some changes as we get a little further into the fall here. I would expect sometime in the next 7 to 10 days, both chambers will hold their leadership elections and formalize that process. And then it'll be a few weeks after that before the leaders name who's on which committees and who's chairing what committees. So starting with the House Commerce Committee. The Commerce Committee is where we deal with most of our insurance legislation. The House Commerce Committee chair retired, so he was not up for re-election. So definitely going to have a new chairman there, or chairwoman. And I think we will see some more gender and ethnicity distribution across the chairs this time, just kind of as an aside. Ultimately, though, the House Commerce Committee has kind of had a structure where they have somebody who chairs the subcommittee for any insurance bills. So all the insurance bills for a number of years now have pretty much gone to the same person. And that's a new person in the last cycle from what it was before. But the good news for us is that's John Jacobson, who John Paul, who's on the call here, knows very well from his area. And John Jacobson has been very friendly to us, very kind to us, and again has a great relationship with one of our members. So that's always a nice plus. Gives us that in to make the local phone call as well. But I expect John will remain on commerce and probably remain the insurance expert there. So whoever the chair is, don't expect huge changes there. Now the question is what happens in the Senate. The Senate chair is Dan Dawson, also from John Paul's area in Council Bluffs. Dan has been the chair now for just a couple of years, just long enough to get his feet wet and really kind of get his feet under him, get his sea legs. He's been really good to us as well, helpful on a number of issues. The question is what else happens? So I mentioned that Charles Snyder, who's the Senate president, chose not to run. And so that opens up a vacancy for the Senate president, which the presumptive person to fill that spot will be Jake Chapman, who many of you know and who's been a regular attendee of our gatherings at the Pizza Ranch in Atlantic when we have the legislative meeting out there. So I think Chapman becomes the Senate president, which vacates the Ways and Means Committee chairmanship. And so the question is, does Dawson take a look at something else? He was at one point, and may still be, I can't keep track, ranking member of Ways and Means. And so that's the question, is whether he decides he wants to move somewhere else or wants to make a play. And I haven't looked at how the fundraising breaks down. Sometimes that'll be a signal as to who's in the best position to ask for the chairmanship they want and get it. Dan had a re-elect this time that was fairly competitive. So, I think a lot of the money he raised, he probably had to spend in his own race. So did not maybe contribute as much to the overall Republican effort in the Senate. So wouldn't have that chip to cash in, but by the same token, he is a stalwart in their caucus and an opinion leader in their caucus, highly respected. So who knows? But I did text Dan and ask him if he cared to say what his intentions were. I have not heard back yet, but I think, like a lot of folks who had a race last night, he's probably got more texts and emails than he can answer right now. So anyway, that's kind of how I see things shaping up. Just in terms of issues that we've been working on or talking about. Many of you are aware that we have many aware that we have a situation where we're looking at with some proposed legislation from the insurance division on cybersecurity and kind of what the threshold is for companies that might apply to. We're having some early conversations about that. I suspect we'll be having some more. And that may be something that we want to kind of see if we can legislatively convince folks to bump that threshold up so that our many of our companies, if not all of our companies, are exempted from that bill on the front end. But we'll see. The initial reactions on that from the division is that they don't want to move off of the language they currently have. So I think if we're going that route, we'll have our work cut out for us. But that's kind of the biggest issue for us that's currently on the agenda. And like I say, it's going to be, I would say, better part of 30 days, maybe a little more before we know how those committee assignments are, to more specifically who we're working with. But it'll happen. It'll happen fairly quickly. I also know that just looking toward 2021, the agencies have been asked to severely limit their asks and to focus any asks that they have related to COVID and kind of put those on the front burner. So anything that they think needs to be corrected because of the pandemic or related to the pandemic, those are going to be top priorities going into the session. So we may see, we really just don't know yet, an abbreviated session that's really more focused on pandemic related issues and a minimal number of other things that come into play. But with that, I'll kind of shut up and see if you all have specific questions. I guess I didn't address the federal. I alluded to it a couple times. Obviously, Senator Ernst won re-election in what was a proxy fight between really, in many respects, the Republican and Democratic leaders in the United States Senate. And ultimately, looks like Republicans have picked up 2 seats in the 1st and 2nd congressional districts with Ashley Hinson and Marionette Miller Meeks. Ashley defeating Abby Finkenauer and Marionette Miller Meeks defeating Rita Hart, who was that was the open seat, the Loebsack seat. And last but not least, as many of you also know, Axne held the sort of central Iowa district. And as many of you know, Randy Feenstra, who's been a friend of ours as the prior Ways and Means chair in the Iowa Senate, and a Commerce Committee stalwart as well, is the new congressman to replace Representative King out in Northwest Iowa. So that'll be, as we go to those of you who go on the DC trip with the NAMIC group to their CCP, we'll have a real friendly in Feenstra, and I suspect, based on my experience, will be well received by Hinson and to a lesser degree Miller Meeks. I think Miller Meeks is a little more of focused on human resources and health care issues, being a doctor, so probably won't be as up to speed on our issues. Hinson has been in Commerce Committee, so she'll be one that will be a potential, a good one for us to work with at the federal level. Any questions?
Well, Mike, this is John Paul. Maybe a question for you. In 2 years, when we rewind and get ready to start this all over again, and looks like we need to pick up some additional seats, can we expect maybe another $1 million to come in from Fred Hubble to help us?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what to expect other than, that's another thing to think about, is that we are ultimately going to have a redistricting. So there'll be a new map. So that is typically a cycle when you see a lot of new faces come into play. And that'll be one of the really interesting things, I think, in terms of the congressional seats, is how those get redistributed or redrawn in the process. So, depending on which way those maps are drawn, should be interesting to see who's in good stead and who isn't. But yeah, as John alluded to, Fred Hubble and Democrats were very successful in setting up a fundraising mechanism called Act Blue that raised just a ton of money, particularly in a number of the Iowa House and Senate races. We saw some folks just get blown out 3-4 to 1 or more. Specifically, the district that I live in Ankeny, the district just the south of me, also on the south side of Ankeny, and another one over there by John Paul, where former House Speaker Brent Segrist ran for Marianne Hanusa's seat, and many of you know Marianne because she was a regular at some of our MIAI meetings as well. But those are 3 great examples where there was just a bunch of money for the Democratic candidate. And I think, one of the challenges they had this cycle for Democrats is their view on the pandemic is very much different from the Republicans, if that isn't evident already. In particular, how it worked out in the races is that Republicans took a traditional approach, still going out and physically knocking on people's doors, talking to voters, and Democrats took a virtual approach to that. And I think that's really what hurt them in some of these seats, particularly the 2 seats that are the one I sit in, the one just south of me here. I think that was a huge factor in that, because my rep knocked 18,000 doors between him and his team. And I know the guy to the south here, I don't know how many he hit, but quite a few also, and they really got a jump. And so Democrats ended up playing catch up. And again, they had plenty of money to do things, but you can still only buy so many, TV or web ads. So it'll be interesting to see how the money flows the next time around, for sure.
Katie Hall, do you have anything to add?
Let me pull myself off of mute here. Sorry, I started talking first. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay, perfect. Well, as I'm trying to start my video here, I'm just in between meetings, so I thought I'd pop in my car where I had a little privacy to talk with you guys. I don't have a whole lot to add to what Mike's comments were earlier. It's been really interesting to see some of the down ticket changes, and I'm talking rural communities, going totally red. We've got some interesting things happening across the state. Just some local folks that are paying attention and saying, hey, we lost a county supervisor that was a Democrat that did a really great job, but instead of a blue wave, I could say we had a red fire. It was not a water sign this time around. So very interesting. I know Mike was emailing us at like 2 a.m. this morning, and there was some interesting communication from the Iowa House GOP as well. So never a dull moment, and it sounds like there's still a few things to be worked out.
Yeah, to Katie's point, there is an interesting sort of a rural and urban split happening, and Democrats have really had a challenge to try to hang on to or be competitive in some of the rural seats, and so you're getting to the point where you have to struggle to sort of think, and Katie and I do a bunch of work in the ag sector as well, which is where you all, do a lot of your work. You really have just a handful of ag legislators anymore. The Senate has always leaned a little more agrarian, if you will. But, so you do have a few more over there, like Senator Zumba and Senator Kinney on the Democratic side. But when you talk about Democrats who are big ag Democrats, you're really down to kind of Senator Kinney in the Senate, and really, Minority Leader Pritchard in the House. And he's really not he's not a farmer. He's an attorney in a small town, but does a lot of ag law practice and that kind of thing. So definitely has some inroads to the agricultural communities. But it's just been interesting the way that's sort of split out the last few years. And it'll be interesting to see if redistricting changes that. Whether the districts are drawn such that you get a little more rural mixed with the urban, because right now it's kind of split. You have urban seats or rural seats, and to a degree, near the two shall meet.
Mike, I have one question. If you and Katie are available on January 6th, Wednesday, January 6th, to bring us up to date on what happened once the legislature opened, which I think it's due to do on January 4th, so that we can find out who got the chairs and what impact, if anything. So would you two be available to reprise this for us?
Probably. I'll have to look and see. We should, especially, I presume, are you still looking at being virtual then?
Yes, indeed. In fact, our managers meeting will also be virtual. So this would take the place of what you'd normally do at the managers meeting.
Yeah, that's what I assumed. And that makes it a little easier as well, typically. And I really have no idea what to expect in terms of the legislative session, whether we'll be into stuff or whether they'll kind of gavel in and do their swearing in and some of those kinds of things. And then, take a siesta for a few weeks or months to let, depending on where we are with the vaccine potentially or distribution and how we feel about the pandemic at that point. I think those will be factors in how things look. But yeah, we'll get that on the schedule. If there aren't any other questions immediately, it looks like maybe John is starting to ask one. Sorry, go ahead, John.
No, that's all right. In regards to the redistricting, will that be a part of 2021 and effective with the next election cycle, or what is the time frame on that, Mike?
Correct. It should be part of this next session, I believe, and will be effective then in the next cycle. So I've been a part of two of those, and been a part of doing some of the analysis for the Republicans on what the districts look like. For those who aren't aware, Iowa does have a system that I think is best it can takes the politics out of it. We're often held up as a model across the country. So the maps are drawn by the nonpartisan Legislative Services Bureau, or Legislative Services Agency. I'm making a hybrid of what the agency used to be and what it is now. But they get together and draw a map. And the first two times that they draw a map, the legislature either has to vote it straight up or straight down. They can't make any changes to it. Only on the third time around could they make a change. But I don't know that we've ever gotten to that phase. I think for one thing, they're scared to death of it. They're scared to death of what happens if they get to that point, that they're accused of, gerrymandering the districts or whatever. So we really do have a pretty clean and straightforward process that takes a lot of the politics out of it. Now, if you get a map and you think it doesn't favor your party very much, and everybody does their analysis on that, you might reject that, but you also have to consider what you might get if you reject it, and sort of being stuck with a second one. So it has some checks and balances that kind of keep everybody on the up and up. I will say this cycle's been super interesting for me. One of the things that you know, my district being one of the targets that ultimately Democrats really thought they could pick up the seat where I live. I'm good friends with my rep and supported him in his very first effort. So I engaged in that campaign, and I usually don't engage in campaigns outside of, you know, the district where I live. I will engage in that one sometimes, and so I did have the opportunity to knock doors and see what people are thinking and feeling, and I was really wondering going in, because you kind of have these alternate realities going on, that we're doing sort of the old school traditional, you know, door knocking and chasing absentee ballots and follow up and all that kind of thing. And Democrats, I just hadn't seen in this district much activity. And ultimately, when we as lobbyists get the opportunity many times to be invited to kind of hear the presentations of the leaders on both sides, on which races they're playing in and kind of who the rock star candidates are and that kind of thing. So we get that advantage of hearing both sides presentation. And so when Democrats, you know, presented and said that the Democratic candidate in this district was a rock star and it really hit all of the marks that they were looking for and was really doing great things, it didn't marry up with what I was seeing. So I was really kind of unsure of myself in some respects as to how this would go. And both sides would tell you that their polling was whisper close, like it was coin flip close. And so could go either way. So, which didn't really make sense to me based on what I'd seen. And again, if I just done some other things and hadn't personally knocked on doors, I think it would have looked different to me. But it was just interesting to see how it played out. And ultimately, as we got a little closer, I really did feel like the door knocking was going to make a big difference. Again, because I did it, I saw how people reacted at the door, and they were actually really receptive to folks knocking on the door. And again, you step back and keep your distance at the door, but they were really happy to see you out and really willing to talk. So I thought the engagement level for those who did knock doors was pretty incredible. It was just a question in my mind how the virtual stuff was going to work and whether it really made that much difference. But I really feel like I know for me, and y'all can answer for yourselves, but whether it's the emails or the pop-ups if you're watching YouTube, or the text messages you get, for me it's like delete. The video might play, but I'm doing something else, and I just don't pay attention to much of any of that unless it's something I haven't seen and I want to see it more for my purpose as a political scientist than as actually a voter. But
and this is Katie. I just want to piggyback on it because Mike is being humble too, because he and I have had multiple conversations about what our expectations were, and he had seen some things and had some clues that we may see a bit of a red wave instead of a blue wave. And where I sit and some of the interactions I had were not the same. And so it was really interesting to me that I felt like Mike called it before the election happened. Truly, I'd seen some really interesting things in knocking doors and having those conversations with people. So yeah, it's incredible what that involvement keys you into as we're looking at the election and analyzing it going forward too.
Yeah, Katie and I have a mutual friend too, who's really, I think, one of the rising stars for the Democrats in Representative Jennifer Conforst. And so it was about 10 days before the election, the Thursday, a week ago, last Thursday, that I got together with Representative Conforst for coffee, and was really thinking I wanted to try to avoid talking politics with her because, her being on the other side and in leadership, I just didn't really want to get too far into that. I was there for a client purpose to deliver a check and have a conversation, but she jumped all over it. We started talking politics, and it was just interesting to see the sort of the different points of view, but again, the places where the Republicans and Democrats agreed that certain races were whisper close, and then they turned out not to be. And sometimes I have that fight with myself, having come from a Republican background. I feel like maybe I'm wearing my Republican hat or drinking the Republican Kool-Aid too much. So I get really worried. And sometimes maybe overcorrect a little bit the other way. Not sure whether my instinct is as good as maybe it ended up being, but it's fun when you're with your friends over beers and you can predict the long shot and then it comes true because you look like a genius, but you don't typically go predicting those long shots in front of clients. Any other questions I can answer for folks about policy or process or the election?
Well, thank you, Mike. As people know, I'm a firm believer. We don't need, we can sit and chat about other things if we want, but for those who have work piled up on their desks, we don't hold people to the full 45 minutes. Thank you both for your insight and your honest sharing. We really appreciate it, and we appreciate the work you do for us at the Iowa Capitol. So,
Thank you.
any final questions before we end today?
Appreciate it, Mike, Katie.
Happy to do it.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks, Katie.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
So thank you all, and that will.
Sounds good. Thanks, Katie.
Thanks.